Water use statistics for the Pacific Basin, of which the Rio Santa is a subbasin, largely mirror national use. The majority of water used for agriculture, which makes up 80% of the total water used for both national Pacific Basin levels. This includes large-scale commercial agriculture projects and subsistence-based strategies. Official figures suggest that more than half of this water is lost due to irrigation techniques, which are typically flooding the field whenever irrigation is necessary. Domestic services are the next largest use, followed by industry and mining. Potable water and other domestic uses lose 30 to 40% of their water due to leaking tubes, poor installations, and out-of-date equipment. Other losses are from people illegally connecting to the system and taking water. Within hydrological circles, many claim that the industry and mining numbers for water are not accurate due to their exploitation of underground aquifers, which are not included in these numbers or even well documented in Peru. In Copa, water is used again in a similar pattern, mostly for irrigation but also for animal consumption and domestic uses. There is no ongoing mining or industrial activity in Copa, but can be found nearby. Previously, all water used was from either the irrigation canals or the natural springs. Now, any water consumed or used for domestic activities is taken from the potable water tap, which draws water from the foot of the glacier. Canals are almost solely used for irrigation. Currently in Copa, the management of water is not shifting to reflect the new realities that are rapidly approaching. Some leaders and elders in the community claim that there is nothing to be done, while others argue that they do not have the knowledge or expertise needed to approach such problems. Even though the issues are recognized and feared, little or no action has been taken to adjust. The people of Copa very clearly connect glacier recession with the water they use to live. Although they have not yet seen devastating change in the hydrological regime of the area, many people fear for the viability of the near future. Most of those interviewed are sure that after watching the glacier recede year after year, it will indeed disappear, and it will happen in the very near future, maybe 20 or 50 years, in their lifetime and certainly that of their children. They worry that the water will dry up and the people and animals will eventually die. When asked whether moving to another place or city was an option, most scoffed at the idea, claiming that these glaciers are the source of all water in Peru, so if there wasn't any water here, there wouldn't be any anywhere else. Many feel as though there are no solutions. The glacier is melting and no amount of money or technology will fix it. The concept of impending water scarcity has been a concern for many generations in Copa, but they've yet to see significant enough change to require action. The neighborhoods of Copa that are farthest away from the glacier already claim there is not enough water for irrigation. However, the majority of the community still has enough water to survive, although they too notice changes. Vulnerability not only refers to the exposure and sensitivity of a given system, but also the risk from social and economic situations within the system. Social vulnerability research explores the larger systemic ways in which certain people are put more at risk, and the adaptive capacity of such groups. Adaptive capacity, or the ability to respond to impacts, depends on the extent to which the problem is understood, the knowledge accessible to potentially vulnerable groups, that adaptive responses are recognized and available, and that the society has the resources to implement adaptive measures. Regions such as the Cordillera Blanca are extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. There's a large degree of poverty and marginalization, political corruption, disinterest, and a lack of resources and information sharing. The region is dependent on agriculture for its income and subsistence, which is of course highly sensitive to climatic changes such as temperature fluctuations, water availability, and pest plagues and diseases. Additionally, people are increasingly turning to wage labor to substitute or supplement their agricultural livelihoods, which is causing traditional social networks that are based on sharing work and harvest, which helps families and communities survive crop failures or other hardships, to become less available to those in need. The necessary responses to upcoming climate changes in the highlands of Peru are within the current local land use system, although external socioeconomic or political forces could impede such adaptations by being unsupportive or even antagonistic. Known barriers or challenges are seated in the long-standing mistrust on the part of communities. This mistrust is fed by the corruption and heavily skewed power dynamics throughout the country. There are also various perspectives on land tenure and environmental governance between traditional communities and regional or national political governments, in addition to the many temporal and spatial scales of decision-making that takes place in the highlands. At the regional level, government priorities are to improve institutional capacity and coverage, protect the recharge zone for the watershed by discouraging deforestation and providing incentives for planting trees, and to improve the efficiency of water use throughout the region. By far, the reforestation program is the most successfully implemented, although debates continue about planting native trees versus less appropriate introduced species. As far as water efficiency is concerned, this is mainly a radio campaign on the part of the government, although some professors are working these themes into classrooms. Several NGOs are working with individual communities on how to more effectively use water. usually through family seminars on the need to conserve and technical assistance with creating drip irrigation using recycled plastic bottles and establishing rainwater harvesting systems. While there is a need for policy responses at the regional and national governance scales, what may be occurring on the ground is frequently overlooked and a key aspect to the longer-term success of adaptation. Some communities have a long shared experience with environmental changes or extremes and should be engaged to help determine adaptive measures. Many point to the reintroduction of ancient techniques as a way for indigenous communities to adjust to climatic changes, particularly with regard to water availability. This memory or connection to past water management strategies is sporadic. Some communities are well connected to their ancestral ways of managing, but others have lost this connection. My work has not turned up memories of historical management practices or times of water scarcity in Copa. However, elsewhere in the valley and in the country, archaeologists and communities are working together to uncover ancient techniques for water management that may help communities in times of scarcity. In Copa, there are no large-scale responses or planned responses to climate change. Many individuals feel that there is nothing that can be done about impending water problems. Is this an acceptance of their fate? It's certainly not a refusal to acknowledge the threat, as almost everyone considers it a future reality. Perhaps it's simply a question of prioritization. There's a certain level of risk the people of Copa are willing to live with, and until the problem reaches a threshold, it's a discussion for tomorrow. That said, there are adjustments occurring in the community that are likely due to a myriad of factors, but that may indeed help them in the coming years as agriculture becomes increasingly difficult due to environmental changes and increasing demand. More and more families are beginning to diversify their income. In addition to farming or raising animals, families are also growing specialty crops for the market, establishing trout hatcheries and tree plantations, and seeking out wage labor. Some families are responding to the decreasing productivity in the fields by sending children to live in cities to work or even to continue their education. Other locally proposed adaptation strategies include improving native animal herding instead of the cows, pigs, and sheep that tear apart native vegetation and tend towards overgrazing, building simple greenhouses for certain plants or flowers that could be economically or domestically useful but are being harmed by changing conditions, testing new crops that would be more drought, heat, or cold resistant, replanting native varieties instead of or in addition to eucalyptus, especially in the heads of watersheds, continuing to educate on rainwater harvesting, drip irrigation, and other water conservation measures, increase economically sound local tourism, including homestays, making new products for the market, creating new dishes out of sustainable products, and reintroducing or improving weaving or other crafting practices. While large-scale adaptation measures still seem far off, there are many smaller efforts that will aid in the long-term viability of these highland communities.